Welcome to Silent Queen's Reckoning. I'm so glad you could join us today. Now let's dive right into the story.
Chapter 1. The divorce certificate was still warm from the printer when Nora Whitaker called her father. "Dad," she said, standing on the courthouse steps with rain on her black coat, "fire all his cronies today." Across the street, her ex-husband stopped smiling. Evan Vale had been laughing with his lawyer a moment earlier, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding the folder that ended their 6-year marriage. He looked relieved, almost victorious. He believed the divorce had finally freed him from Nora's cold family, Nora's quiet judgment, Nora's father watching every boardroom with old money eyes. Then he heard her sentence. Fire all his cronies today. The smile left his face so quickly it looked wiped away. Nora did not lower her phone. Her father, Arthur Whitaker, was silent for 1 second. He was not a man who wasted questions. If his daughter used that tone, she had already decided. "All of them?" he asked. "Every person Evan placed in Whitaker Meridian while I was pretending the marriage could still be saved." Evan crossed the wet pavement in 3 hard strides. "Nora," he snapped, "what are you doing?" She turned slightly, enough to let him see her profile. Calm face, pale lips, no tears. That was what frightened him. For years, Evan had known how to deal with Nora when she was hurt. He could call her sensitive, dramatic, ungrateful. He could remind her that marriage required patience. He could point to his mother and say Nora had never tried hard enough to be family. He could point to his assistant, Lyra Shaw, and say jealousy was ugly on a woman with Nora's education. But he had no script for this Nora. This Nora held the divorce certificate like a receipt. "Before 6 tonight," Nora said into the phone, "security badges canceled, system access frozen, external audit notified, HR present, no exceptions for loyalty claims." Evan's face drained. "Nora, stop!" Arthur's voice came through clearly enough for Evan to hear. "Done." Nora ended the call. Rain tapped against the courthouse awning. Evan stared at her as if she had slapped him in front of the judge. "You cannot do that," he said. "I did not do it. Dad will. Those people are employees. Those people are your network inside my family's company." His jaw tightened. "You mean people who respected me because I actually understood operations?" Nora looked at him. Evan Vale was handsome in the way ambition likes to dress itself. Tall, sharp suit, clean smile, expensive watch. When they married, people said Nora was lucky to have a self-made man who was not intimidated by the Whitaker name. Later, Nora realized he had never been intimidated because he had always planned to use it. "I understand operations too," she said. "That is why they are being removed before they delete anything." For half a second, something like panic flashed in his eyes. There it was. The proof before the proof. Evan leaned closer. "You are making a mistake." "No, the mistake was letting you bring your friends into departments they were not qualified to enter. They helped the company. Then the audit will thank them." His hand closed around her wrist. Not hard enough for a bruise. Hard enough to remind her of 6 years of private commands. Nora looked down at his fingers. "Let go." Evan did not. Her lawyer, Celia Grant, stepped forward from behind her. Celia was small, silver-haired, and carried herself like a verdict in heels. "Mr. Vale," Celia said, "remove your hand from my client." He let go. People passing under umbrellas slowed. Evan noticed and immediately changed his face. "Nora," he said, voice softer now, "do not let bitterness ruin your dignity." She almost laughed. He had slept with Lyra for 2 years, moved company contracts through Lyra's brother, placed his college friends in procurement, logistics, and finance, used Nora's board seat to shield them, and now spoke to her about dignity. "Dignity is not leaving thieves in the house because they know where the silver is," Nora said. Evan's eyes hardened. "You will regret this." Nora stepped past him. "No, Evan. Tonight, regret changes owners." Chapter 2. Whitaker Meridian began losing Evan's people at 3:07 p.m. The first was Miles Crane, head of procurement and Evan's best man. He had been appointed 3 years earlier after Evan claimed the department needed someone loyal, practical, and hungry. Nora later learned hungry was often another word for willing to take a cut. Security met Miles outside conference room 4. His badge stopped working before he finished swiping it a second time. "There must be an error," he said. The security officer held out a printed notice. "Mr. Crane, your access has been suspended pending review." "Review of what?" "Procurement transactions and vendor relationships." His face changed. The second was Paula Vance in finance, who had approved unusually timed reimbursements tied to Lyra Shaw's consulting expenses. The third was Thomas Elbridge in logistics, who redirected warehouse work to a shell vendor registered in his wife's maiden name. The fourth was Evan's former roommate, hired as special strategy director despite producing only 3 slide decks and a trail of lunch receipts. By 4, the executive floor buzzed like a broken electrical line. Arthur Whitaker watched from his office with his hands folded behind his back. He was 70, broad-shouldered, and more frightening in silence than most men were in anger. His hair had gone white years ago. His eyes had not softened with it. On the wall behind him hung portraits of 3 generations of Whitakers who built rail lines, ports, factories, and enough family pride to injure anyone who mishandled it. Nora stood beside him. She had changed from the courthouse coat into a charcoal suit. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry except a narrow watch and her wedding ring, now in a small envelope in Celia's briefcase. Arthur glanced at her. "You should sit." "I have been sitting for 6 years." He accepted that. On the security feed, Miles Crane shouted at HR. Arthur's mouth tightened. "I should have removed them earlier." "I asked you not to." "You asked me to respect your marriage." "That was my mistake." Arthur turned fully toward her. For a moment, the chairman disappeared and the father remained. "No," he said. "Your mistake was loving someone who treated restraint as permission. That is not a crime." Nora looked away. She had not cried at the courthouse. Not when the judge signed. Not when Evan walked out smiling. Not when Celia squeezed her hand. But her father's sentence nearly undid her. Arthur did not touch her. He knew she was holding herself together by exact pressure. He only stood near enough for her to lean if she chose. She did not. Not yet. At 4:42, Celia entered with an audit binder. "We have movement," she said. "Deletion attempts?" Nora asked. "Yes. 2 finance accounts tried to access archived vendor approvals after suspension notices went out. IT froze them. Procurement server logs show a mass download attempt last night." Arthur's eyes sharpened. "By whom?" "Miles Crane." Nora inhaled slowly. Last night, while the divorce papers waited on the courthouse docket, Evan's best man had tried to pull company files. "Not loyalty." "Cover." Celia placed another sheet on the desk. "There is also a recurring payment to Northline Market Strategy." "Lyra's brother," Nora said. Arthur looked at her. She felt his surprise. "You knew?" "I suspected." "For how long?" 7 months. Pain crossed his face. Nora kept speaking before it could settle. Lyra said her brother owned a small creative agency. Evan said it was harmless. Then I saw invoices for supply chain research from an agency that had no supply chain clients. I asked Evan. He said I was looking for reasons to hate his success. Celia's expression hardened. "Northline received $2.4 million over 18 months, she said. Arthur turned back to the window. Below, the city rain streaked the glass in silver lines. "Call internal investigations," he said. "Then outside counsel, then the police if counsel agrees." Nora felt the room tilt slightly. Police. She had known this might come. Knowing did not make it lighter. Evan had not only cheated. He had stolen. From her family. From employees whose bonuses had been cut last winter because procurement costs mysteriously rose. From a company that had fed 3 generations of workers while men like him learned to call themselves visionaries. Her phone lit up. Evan. She let it ring. Then his mother called. Marjorie Vale. Nora watched the name pulse on the screen. Arthur saw it too. You do not have to answer. Not yet, Nora said. The phone went dark. 5 seconds later, a message appeared. Marjorie, what have you done to my son? Nora looked at the message and felt something cold settle in her hands. For 6 years, Marjorie had asked what Nora had failed to do. Failed to cook enough, smile enough, host enough, forgive enough. Tonight, finally, Marjorie asked the correct question with the wrong subject. What had been done? They were about to find out. Chapter 3. Marjorie Vale arrived at Nora's apartment at 9:18 p.m. She came in pearls. That was the first thing Nora noticed on the security camera. The second was the umbrella. Marjorie hated holding umbrellas because she believed they made women look unassisted, so a driver usually walked her to doors. Tonight she stood alone in the rain beneath the awning, clutching a black umbrella with both hands. Nora watched from the hallway monitor. Celia, still at the dining table with files spread open, looked up. Do you want to refuse her? Nora considered it. The apartment was hers. It had always been hers. Evan moved in after marriage and called it their home, then corrected the art, criticized the sofa, and let Marjorie open kitchen cabinets as if inspection were affection. For years, Nora had endured Marjorie's visits because Evan said his mother was lonely. Tonight, loneliness could wait in the lobby. Then Marjorie looked directly into the camera and said, I know you are watching. Let me up before I make a scene. Celia sighed. She brought the old music. Nora pressed the intercom. You have 10 minutes. Marjorie entered the apartment 5 minutes later. Rain dotted her gray coat. Her hair was still perfect, silver and sculpted. Her face carried the controlled distress of a woman accustomed to making other people feel crude for noticing her cruelty. She looked around the room and saw Celia. This is family business. Celia smiled. You are divorced. It is now paperwork business. Marjorie's mouth tightened. Nora, send her away. Nora remained standing near the fireplace. No. One word. Marjorie blinked. She had never liked Nora, but she had understood the old Nora. The old Nora offered tea to women who insulted her. The old Nora apologized when Marjorie said the table setting looked cold. The old Nora retreated when Evan said his mother meant well. This Nora did not move. Marjorie turned desperate quickly. Evan called me. Security humiliated him in his own office. It was not his office. Do not be petty. Accuracy is not pettiness. Marjorie's nostrils flared. You have turned your father against him. Nora stared at her. My father did not need turning. He needed evidence. That word entered the room like a blade. Marjorie heard it. Her expression shifted from outrage to calculation. What evidence? Celia closed one folder. Enough. Marjorie ignored her. Nora, listen to me. Men make mistakes when they are under pressure. Evan was trying to prove himself in that company. Your family never accepted him. My family gave him a senior executive role. Under supervision. Because he was unqualified. Marjorie's face flushed. How dare you? I learned it from your son. For a second, silence held. Nora walked to the dining table and picked up one page from the audit file. Northline Market Strategy. Payments. Approvals. Project descriptions. Lyra Shaw's brother listed as owner. She placed it in front of Marjorie. This is one vendor. Marjorie looked down. Her face changed. Not shock. Recognition. Nora saw it and felt her stomach tighten. You knew. Marjorie lifted her chin too quickly. I do not know what that is. Your face did. Do not speak to me like that. Then stop lying in my home. Marjorie stared at her. Celia's pen moved quietly. Marjorie's hands trembled once, then stilled. Evan said it was temporary, a way to balance what your father withheld from him. He said the company owed him. There it was. The family gospel of entitled men. What they could not earn, they renamed as debt. And Lyra? Nora asked. Marjorie's mouth thinned. That girl is nothing. Nora almost smiled. That girl. For years, Lyra Shaw had sat beside Evan at dinners, wearing soft dresses and a careful smile, calling Marjorie Mrs. Vale with sugared respect. Marjorie had praised her devotion, praised her warmth, told Nora once, with a little sigh, that some women simply knew how to make a man feel admired. Now that girl was nothing. She was enough for him to betray me with, Nora said. Marjorie stepped closer. You can still stop this. Tell Arthur to keep it internal. Let Evan resign quietly. Do not ruin him. Why? Because you were his wife. Today I became his ex-wife. Because you loved him. He spent that. Marjorie's eyes filled. The tears looked real. That was inconvenient. People could be manipulative and still hurt. He is my son, she whispered. Nora's voice softened, not from pity, but from exhaustion. Then you should have raised him to know the difference between ambition and theft. Marjorie slapped her. It happened fast. A sharp crack across the room. Celia stood instantly. Nora's face turned to the side. Heat bloomed along her cheek. For 1 second, no one moved. Then Nora looked back. Her eyes were dry. That, she said, will be in the report too. Marjorie looked at her hand as if it belonged to someone else. Security arrived before the next sentence. Chapter 4. The slap became useful. Nora hated that. She hated that even pain had to become evidence. She hated sitting under bright kitchen lights while Celia photographed the red mark on her cheek. She hated the security statement, the timestamp, the building footage showing Marjorie entering and leaving. She hated that part of her life had become a file. Celia saw it. You can be tired of documenting and still document, she said. Nora sat at the dining table, fingers wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. Is that supposed to be comforting? No, it is supposed to be useful. You are very bad at comfort. That is why I became a lawyer. Nora laughed once. It hurt her cheek. At midnight, Arthur came over. He had not asked. He simply arrived with his driver and a wool coat over his suit. When he saw Nora's face, something in him went very still. Who hit you? Marjorie. Arthur's jaw tightened. Where is she? Removed by security. Good. He sat across from her, not beside her, across as if they were in a board meeting, because sometimes that was how he gave her strength. He respected her enough not to smother her. The audit team found more, he said. Nora set down the tea. Tell me. Northline is one of 4 vendors. 2 connect to Evan's college friends, 1 to Lyra's brother, 1 to a former Vale family accountant. How much? Early estimate, $6.8 million. Nora closed her eyes. The number moved through her like cold water. And Evan? Emails tie him to at least 3 approvals. Messages suggest he knew invoices were inflated. We do not yet know whether he personally received funds. Celia opened another file. We may soon. She laid out printed screenshots. Lyra Shaw's messages. Nora stared at them. Where did these come from? Anonymous delivery to my office. Arthur looked at Celia. Anonymous? A courier envelope, no return address. Nora read the first message. Evan, Miles is nervous. Tell your brother to pause new invoices until after the divorce. Lyra, Nora still suspects? Evan, Nora suspects feelings, not numbers. The sentence struck harder than the slap. Nora suspects feelings, not numbers. He had underestimated her in categories. Woman, wife, hurt, jealous. Not strategist, not director, not daughter of Arthur Whitaker, not the person who had quietly tracked vendor anomalies while waiting for enough proof to move without being called hysterical. Arthur read the message over her shoulder. His face darkened. He will answer for that. Nora continued. Lyra, your mother says Nora will never expose you because divorce already makes her look discarded. Evan, mother worries too much. Nora cares about dignity more than revenge. Lyra, good. Dignity is useful. Nora put the page down. For a moment, her vision blurred. Not from tears. From rage so clean it felt almost white. Dignity is useful. They had used her restraint like a locked door behind which they could steal. Celia's voice was low. There is enough here to expand the investigation. Arthur nodded. Tomorrow morning, full board briefing. Nora looked at him. No. Both turned to her. Not just the board, she said. Employees first. Arthur's brows drew together. Nora. Evan will tell them we are punishing staff, cutting loyal people, destroying livelihoods because of a divorce. He already knows how to turn power into victimhood. We speak to employees first. Clean facts, no gossip, no affair details unless legally necessary. Payroll protected. Whistleblower line open. Investigation independent. Celia smiled faintly. Arthur studied his daughter. Then he nodded. 9 a.m. Town Hall. Nora touched the bruise on her cheek. And invite press for the board statement afterward. Celia's eyes sharpened. You are sure? Nora looked at the messages again. Dignity is useful. Yes, she said. Let us make it less useful to them. Chapter 5. The town hall began at 9. Whitaker Meridian's main atrium filled with employees from every floor. Some stood on the stairs, others leaned over balconies. Rumors had already done what rumors do, arriving before facts, dressed as fear. Nora stood at the front beside Arthur, Celia, HR, and the head of internal investigations. She did not cover the mark on her cheek. Makeup could have hidden it. She chose not to. Not for drama. For accuracy. Evan had always preferred women polished enough to make men's ugliness look impossible. Nora had no interest in helping him. Arthur opened first. Yesterday, several employees were suspended pending investigation into procurement, vendor relationships, and executive approvals. This review concerns documented irregularities, not personal disputes. The atrium murmured. He continued, payroll is secure, current operations continue, no employee will be punished for cooperating, any retaliation will be met with immediate action. Then he stepped back. Nora walked to the microphone. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her cheek. Good. Many of you know my divorce was finalized yesterday, she said. Some of you may hear that what happened afterward was emotional, vindictive, or personal. I want to say this once, clearly. A marriage ended yesterday. A financial investigation began because records required it. Silence settled. She lifted one page. Over the past 18 months, companies connected to personal associates of former executive Evan Vale received millions in payments now under review. Some payments appear tied to inflated invoices, incomplete work, and undisclosed conflicts. These concerns existed before the divorce was finalized. Faces changed. Fear became a tension. If you worked honestly, Nora said, this investigation protects you. If you were pressured to approve something improper, come forward. If you were told the Whitaker family would blame employees to protect its name, that was a lie. We are protecting the company by exposing what was done to it. On the second-floor balcony, someone began to clap. Not loudly. Once. Then again. The applause spread slowly. It did not become celebration. It became relief with sound. Nora stepped back before emotion could reach her face. Arthur looked at her, and for a second she saw his pride without his armor. At 11, the board statement went live. Whittaker Meridian announced an independent investigation into procurement fraud, vendor conflicts, and misuse of executive authority under former executive Evan Vale and Associates. Names of suspended employees were withheld pending legal review. Law enforcement had been notified. The company committed to public updates where appropriate. At 11:30, Evan held his own press appearance outside his lawyer's office. He wore a dark suit and wounded eyes. "This is a personal vendetta by a powerful family," he said. "I loved my wife. I worked tirelessly for her company. Now, because our marriage ended, they are trying to destroy everyone loyal to me." Nora watched from Arthur's office with Celia and 3 board members. Lyra stood behind Evan. Of course she did. She wore a navy dress, hair tucked neatly behind her ears, eyes wide with rehearsed distress. A former assistant, now visible mistress, trying to look like a loyal colleague caught in a storm. The reporter asked, "Miss Shaw, did your brother's company receive payments from Whittaker Meridian?" Lyra blinked. Evan stepped in. "This is exactly the smear campaign I mean." Nora turned off the screen. "Release the vendor conflict chart." Celia looked at Arthur. Arthur looked at Nora. "Do it," he said. The chart did not include intimate messages. It did not mention the affair. It showed Northline Market Strategies' ownership, payment totals, approval chain, and Lyra Shaw's employment relationship with Evan. Within an hour, every business outlet had it. By evening, Evan's personal story had cracked. That night, Lyra called Nora. Nora answered because Celia was recording. Lyra's voice shook. "You are ruining me for loving him." Nora stood by the window, watching rain slide down the city lights. "No, Lyra, you are under investigation because your brother's company received millions through undisclosed conflicts. Evan said you knew about us. He lied. He said your marriage was dead. He lied. He said you would never touch the company because you were afraid people would say you were jealous." Nora closed her eyes. That part was almost true. Lyra went quiet. Nora opened her eyes. Almost. Chapter 6. Lyra broke before Evan did. Not because she was innocent. Because Evan tried to make her disposable. 2 days after the press statement, Evan's attorney released a written response claiming that Lyra Shaw had handled all vendor introductions related to Northline and that Evan had relied in good faith on staff recommendations. The statement described Lyra as an administrative employee with informal personal ties to vendors. Administrative employee. After 2 years of hotel rooms, bonuses, whispered promises, and Evan telling her she understood him better than his wife ever had, Lyra arrived at Celia's office the next morning with a lawyer, a white face, and a folder full of messages. Nora attended by video from Arthur's conference room. Lyra looked smaller than she had at the press appearance. No navy dress, no soft media eyes, just a gray sweater, hair pulled back, hands gripping a paper cup. "I want immunity," her attorney said. Celia smiled politely. "Then speak to prosecutors. This meeting concerns cooperation with Whittaker Meridian's civil investigation." Lyra swallowed. "Evan told me everything was approved." Nora watched her through the screen. The old version of herself might have hated Lyra too much to listen. The new version knew listening could be sharper than anger. "What did you know?" Nora asked. Lyra flinched at her voice. "I knew Northline belonged to my brother. I knew the invoices were high. I did not know the total." "Did you receive money?" Lyra looked down. "Some." "How much?" 300,000. Arthur's hand closed around the armrest beside Nora. Lyra began crying. "Evan said it was my share. He said after the divorce he would leave with enough to start something separate. He said you and your father owed him because he made the company modern." Nora felt nothing for 1 second. Then the anger returned, slower and heavier. "Did he say what would happen to me?" Lyra wiped her face. He said you would get the apartment, the name, and everyone's sympathy. He said he deserved the money. Of course. In Evan's mind, Nora's pain was an asset. Her dignity was an asset. Her family name was an asset. Even her public humiliation became something he could balance against stolen money. Lyra's lawyer opened the folder. Messages. Bank transfers. Voice notes. A spreadsheet titled Future Fund. Evan's private email discussing how to move consulting payments through layered vendors. Miles Crane's confirmation that procurement objections had been buried. Then came the file that changed everything. A video from a private dining room. Evan sat at a table with Miles, Lyra, and 2 others. Wine glasses. Low light. Evan laughing. Once the divorce is done, he said on video, Arthur will think he won. Nora will be too proud to fight publicly. We move the rest through Northline, clean it by quarter end, and I walk with what I earned. Miles asked, and if she finds out? Evan smiled. Then I say she is a bitter ex-wife. People love that story. The video ended. No one spoke. Arthur stood and walked to the window. His back was rigid. Nora stared at the frozen screen. Bitter ex-wife. That was the role he had assigned her before she even played her first move. Lyra whispered, I am sorry. Nora looked at her. For what? Lyra froze. It was the same question women like her rarely expected. For helping him, she said finally. For taking the money. For letting him say you were cold when I knew he was using that to excuse everything. Nora nodded once. Cooperate fully. Do not contact me again. Lyra began to cry harder. Nora ended the video call. Arthur turned from the window. I want him prosecuted. Nora's voice was steady. So do I. Chapter 7. Evan's next move was to run before the door locked. He did not flee the country. Men like Evan rarely believed consequences could travel that far. Instead, he tried to move money through respectability. He called a private banker. He called an old college friend who managed family offices. He called a cousin in real estate and asked whether a warehouse purchase could be backdated. Every call was recorded by someone. Not because Nora had spies everywhere. Because Evan had spent years surrounding himself with people who were loyal to opportunity, not to him. The first banker called Arthur at 7:40 the next morning. Mr. Whitaker, he said carefully, I thought you should know Evan Vale requested liquidity options against assets that may be subject to investigation. Arthur thanked him and called Celia. By noon, emergency civil filings were underway to freeze accounts connected to vendor transfers. By 2, 3 banks had received notice. By 4, Evan's lawyer was claiming the freeze was abusive. By 5, a judge had granted temporary restraints on specific accounts due to documented risk of asset movement. Nora read the order in her office. He really thought he could move money after the town hall, she said. Celia leaned against the desk. He thought you were performing. He did not understand you were proceeding. That sentence helped. Performing was what Evan did. Press statements, hurt eyes, loyal husband language, strategic pauses. Nora had spent years mistaking performance for feeling because she wanted the marriage to contain something worth saving. Now paperwork revealed the difference. Performance asked to be believed. Proceeding created consequences. At 6, a news alert appeared. Sources say Whitaker family freezes ex-husband's assets in escalating divorce war. Nora stared at the headline. He leaked again. Or Marjorie did, Celia said. The article painted the asset freeze as cruelty. It used Evan's favorite words, vendetta, overreach, humiliation. It quoted a friend of the Vale family saying Nora had always resented Evan's independence. Nora almost laughed at that. Evan's independence had been funded by her family, staffed by her company, polished by her silence, and defended by his mother. Independence was a generous word. Arthur entered while she was reading. We answer with the filing, he said. Not yet. He stopped. Why? Nora turned the screen toward him. He wants us to look defensive. We answer once we have the hearing transcript and banking affidavits. Clean packet, timeline, no adjectives. Celia looked pleased. Arthur studied Nora with the faint surprise of a father watching his daughter become harder to underestimate even to him. All right, he said. That night, Marjorie called every mutual friend she still had. By morning, Nora had received 6 messages from society women who had once praised her composure and now urged compassion. One wrote that public destruction harmed everyone. Another reminded her that anger leaves a woman's face before it leaves her reputation. A third said Evan had loved her in his way. Nora showed the messages to Celia. Celia read them with mounting disgust. There should be a tax on unsolicited mercy. Nora smiled faintly. Then she wrote one response and sent it to all 6. Thank you for your concern. The matter involves documented corporate fraud, not marital anger. If you possess relevant information, please provide it to counsel. No one replied. By afternoon, the court filings became public. Bank affidavits, transfer attempts, shell entity references, the judge's reasoning. The headline changed before dinner. Court freezes accounts, linked to former Whitaker executive amid fraud inquiry. Evan's divorce war story died faster than his marriage. Chapter 8. Marjorie tried television. It was a bad idea, beautifully dressed. She appeared on a morning business program wearing a dove gray suit and her old pearls, seated in a bright studio beside a host who loved tears when they came from wealthy mothers. The lower screen identified her as mother of former Whitaker executive Evan Vale. Nora watched from the company conference room with Arthur, Celia, and communications staff. Marjorie began softly. My son made mistakes, as all ambitious men do, but he is being publicly destroyed by a family with enormous resources. I am only asking for fairness. The host leaned in. Do you believe this investigation is personal? Marjorie lowered her eyes. I believe pain can make people do things they later regret. Arthur made a sound under his breath. Nora did not move. The host continued, You mean Nora Whitaker? Marjorie looked into the camera. I cared for Nora as a daughter, I still do, but she has been deeply hurt, and hurt people sometimes mistake punishment for justice. Celia turned to Nora. Say the word. Nora waited. Marjorie kept speaking. Evan worked day and night for Whitaker Meridian. He built relationships. He modernized old systems. If vendors made errors, that should be reviewed. But to call him a criminal before trial is cruel. Now, Nora said. Communications released the packet prepared the previous night. It included the court order freezing accounts, the vendor conflict chart, and a statement that Whitaker Meridian had referred evidence to law enforcement and would not litigate facts on morning television. It also included one new item, an internal email from Evan to Miles Crane stating, Make sure Northline stays invisible to board finance until after divorce. The host received the packet during the commercial break. When the program returned, the lighting seemed less kind. Mrs. Vale, the host said, we have just received a statement from Whitaker Meridian, including an email allegedly written by your son regarding one of the vendors under review. Were you aware of Northline market strategy? Marjorie's face stiffened. I am not here to discuss legal documents. But you came to discuss fairness. The room around Nora went very still. The host was not sentimental anymore. She smelled blood. Marjorie tried to recover. My point is that Evan should not be tried in public. You appeared publicly to defend him. Marjorie blinked. Nora almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Public rooms were dangerous when they stopped obeying the person who entered them. By noon, the clip of Marjorie being confronted had spread online. By 2, commentators were asking why she mentioned mistakes before charges had been filed. By 5, someone matched the pearls she wore on air to a social media photo from a dinner with Evan, Lyra, Miles, and 2 suspended executives 6 months earlier. The internet did not prove crimes. It did destroy narratives. Marjorie called Nora at 6. Nora did not answer. She sent one message. Speak through counsel. Marjorie replied, You used to be kinder. Nora stared at the screen. The old wound opened, then closed. She typed, I used to be uninformed. Then she blocked the number. Chapter 9. Lyra's fall began in a luxury apartment she could no longer afford. The lease had been paid through a housing stipend disguised as relocation support. That was one of the first things the investigators found. Lyra had told friends Evan helped her negotiate a good rate. In truth, Northline money flowed through a consulting reimbursement into her brother's account, then back to cover rent, jewelry, and travel. When the account freeze hit, the life around her shrank quickly. Her landlord called. Her brother stopped answering. Evan's lawyer released a statement making her look like a rogue employee. Then Marjorie called her that girl on television in a segment that did not make the final cut, but leaked anyway. That girl. Lyra watched it on her phone, sitting on the edge of a white sofa Evan had chosen because he said it made her apartment look successful. The room around her was full of gifts that suddenly looked like receipts. At 11:30 p.m., she called Nora. Nora answered only because Celia was beside her. I have more, Lyra said. Her voice sounded hollow. Then give it to your attorney, Nora replied. Evan is lying. That has been established. No, about all of it. He says I pushed the vendors. He says Miles and I built Northline without telling him. Nora waited. Lyra breathed shakily. I have recordings. Celia leaned forward. Nora closed her eyes briefly. The night stretched ahead. They met the next morning in Celia's office. Lyra arrived without makeup, wearing sunglasses she removed with trembling hands. Her lawyer carried a folder. Lyra carried nothing. That told Nora the recordings had already been handed over. Lyra looked at Nora. You look well. Nora almost laughed. Do not start with lies. Lyra nodded, ashamed. The first recording was audio from Evan's car. His voice filled the conference room. Arthur thinks legacy means loyalty. It means he is slow. Nora thinks dignity means silence. It means she is useful. We move before either of them realizes numbers are more faithful than people. No one spoke. The second recording involved Marjorie. Her voice was unmistakable, lower than usual. Keep Lyra sweet until the divorce settles. Nora will not make herself ugly in public. She was raised too well. Nora's hands went cold. Celia paused the recording and looked at her. Do you want to stop? No. The third recording was from the private dining room, the same video Lyra later gave prosecutors. Evan spoke of moving funds after divorce and calling Nora bitter if she found out. Lyra cried silently while it played. Nora watched her. The mistress had believed she was chosen. The wife had believed she was building a marriage. Both had been assigned roles in Evan's fraud. That did not make Lyra innocent. It made Evan worse. When the recordings ended, Lyra whispered, I thought he loved me. Nora folded her hands. He loved having someone help him steal and call it belief. Lyra covered her mouth. I am sorry. Say it specifically. Lyra looked up, tears slipping beneath her eyes. I am sorry I slept with your husband. I am sorry I helped him use your company. I am sorry I let him call you cold when I knew he was lying to both of us. I am sorry I took money I did not earn. Nora nodded once. Cooperate with prosecutors. Will that be enough? Nora stood. For the law? Maybe. For me? No. Lyra accepted that because truth left her no better option. Chapter 10. Evan was arrested on a Tuesday morning. Not dramatically. That made it better. There was no chase, no shouting in a parking garage, no heroic collapse. He walked into the lobby of his lawyer's building with coffee in hand, wearing a charcoal suit and a face meant for cameras. 2 investigators met him near the elevators. By noon, the charges were public: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, destruction of records. Lyra was charged separately after cooperation. Miles Crane and 2 others followed. Northline Market Strategies accounts were frozen. Evan's mother released no statement. Nora watched the news in Arthur's office. She expected satisfaction. Instead, she felt very tired. Celia stood beside her. "You okay?" "No." "Fair. I wanted justice to feel cleaner. It rarely does." On screen, reporters replayed Evan's old press appearance beside the vendor chart and the dining room video. The contrast was devastating. Evan calling himself a loyal executive. Evan on video planning to call Nora bitter. Evan smiling as he spoke about moving money. Public exposure did what private pain never could. It removed his polish. By evening, the employees knew. The industry knew. The society pages, which had once celebrated Nora and Evan as a modern power couple, now ran timelines of his rise through Whitaker Meridian and the network he built inside it. Marjorie came to Arthur's office the next day. She did not wear pearls. That was how Nora knew things were truly bad. Security called upstairs, asking whether she should be allowed in. Arthur looked at Nora. Nora nodded. Marjorie entered slowly. Her face had collapsed around the eyes. She looked older than she had the night she slapped Nora. Not repentant yet. Aging and repentance were different. "Arthur," she said. Arthur remained behind his desk. "Mrs. Vale." The formality struck her. She turned to Nora. Her gaze flickered to the cheek she had struck, now healed. "I came to ask you to speak to the prosecutors." Nora almost admired the audacity. "For what purpose?" "Evan is not a criminal." Celia, seated near the wall, lifted one eyebrow. Marjorie rushed on. "He lost his way. He was under pressure. That girl manipulated him." "Lyra is not innocent," Nora said, "but she did not invent your son." Marjorie flinched. "He could go to prison." "Yes." "You would allow that?" Nora stood. Not quickly. Slowly enough that Marjorie watched every inch of it. "I did not allow him to steal. I did not allow him to lie. I did not allow him to plan fraud and call me bitter before I even defended myself. He chose those things." Marjorie's mouth trembled. "I am his mother." "Then visit him." "Nora, do not ask me to become his mother too." Silence. Arthur looked down at his desk, but Nora knew he had heard the full weight of that sentence. For 6 years, she had managed Evan's moods, excuses, debts, image, and mother's expectations. She had been wife, shield, apology, translator, and curtain. Now Marjorie wanted her to become mercy on demand. "No." Marjorie whispered, "I should not have hit you." "No. I was frightened." "You were cruel when frightened. That is still cruelty." Marjorie nodded once, as if each word cost her. "I knew about Lyra," she said. Nora did not move. "I knew before you did. Evan said it was nothing. I told him to end it or be careful. I did not tell you because I thought marriages survive things women do not name." Nora felt a dull ache move through her. "And the money?" Marjorie closed her eyes. "I knew he felt owed. I did not know the details." "You did not want to." Marjorie opened her eyes, wet now. "No." There it was. Not enough to heal. Enough to confirm. "Leave," Nora said. Marjorie nodded and turned toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped. "You were a better wife to him than he deserved." Nora looked out at the city. "I know." Marjorie left. This time, no one followed. Chapter 11. Before the criminal trial, Whitaker Meridian held an internal restitution hearing. It was not required by law. Arthur thought it might be unnecessary. Celia thought it was wise. Nora insisted. The hearing took place in the old boardroom where Evan had once given presentations about modernization while quietly replacing experienced managers with people who laughed at his jokes. The long table had been cleared of water glasses and flowers. Only folders remained, names, records, complaints that had been ignored, warnings buried under Evan's authority. Employees came one by one. Mrs. Patel from logistics came first. She wore a navy cardigan and held her notes with both hands. She described how she had flagged irregular warehouse routing 3 times and been told by Thomas Elbridge that she was obstructing progress. Her performance review later called her resistant to innovation. Nora read the review. The phrase made her jaw tighten. Resistant to innovation. That was how corrupt men renamed honest women. Mrs. Patel, Nora said, you were right. The older woman's mouth trembled. Nora continued, your review will be corrected. Back pay will be issued for the bonus withheld that year. If you are willing, I would like you to help redesign logistics oversight. Mrs. Patel looked down at her notes. I thought I was going to be fired. So did the people who wanted you quiet. The next employee was a junior accountant named Ben Torres. He had questioned Northline's monthly retainers and been moved to a less visible team after Paula Vance described him as lacking business maturity. He was 26, pale with nerves, and kept apologizing before each sentence. Do not apologize for giving facts, Nora said gently. He nodded, then gave more. By the end of the day, the pattern was undeniable. Evan's cronies had not only stolen money, they had damaged honest workers to protect the theft. They called caution negativity. They called questions disloyalty. They called women emotional and young men immature if either group read numbers too closely. Nora sat through every testimony. She did not delegate the discomfort. At 7, when the last employee left, Arthur remained seated across from her. You were right to hold this, he said. Nora closed the final folder. Fraud is never only money. No. It changes who feels safe telling the truth. Arthur nodded slowly. Then we make truth safer. The next week, Whitaker Meridian announced a restitution and restoration plan, corrected reviews, back pay, promotions for employees who had documented concerns, a protected reporting office independent from executive influence. The press liked the criminal angle better. Nora liked this part more. This was how a company stopped being merely avenged and started being repaired. Chapter 12. The trial began 8 months later. By then, Nora had become acting chief operating officer of Whitaker Meridian. Some people called the promotion revenge. Those people had not watched her work 14-hour days rebuilding procurement, replacing vendor controls, meeting frightened employees, and cleaning poison from systems Evan had made look efficient. Arthur watched her closely but did not interfere. That was his apology. Trust. The courtroom was full on the first day. Reporters lined the back row. Former employees sat stiffly on benches. Lyra arrived with her attorney and did not look at Nora. Evan entered in a dark suit, thinner now, still handsome if one did not know how much rot could live behind a jawline. When he saw Nora, his expression flickered. For 1 second, she saw the old expectation. That she would look away. She did not. The prosecution laid out the case with brutal patience. Vendor contracts. Inflated invoices. Kickback routes. Deleted files recovered from backups. Messages. The dining room video. Lyra testified on the 3rd day. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. She admitted the affair, the money, the lies. She admitted. Evan told her Nora would never expose him because Nora valued dignity more than vengeance. The prosecutor asked, "What did you understand that to mean?" Lyra looked down. That he believed she would stay silent if speaking made her look emotional. The courtroom went quiet. Nora felt the sentence pass through strangers, employees, reporters, and finally back to her. There it was. The crime beneath the crime. Not only money stolen from accounts, but silence stolen from a woman by predicting her shame. When Evan testified, he tried charm first. He spoke about pressure, ambition, wanting to prove himself in a legacy company. He described the vendor system as informal. He described Lyra as persuasive. He described Nora as distant. The prosecutor let him talk. That was wise. Evan was always most revealing when he believed he was winning. Then came the messages. Nora suspects feelings, not numbers. Dignity is useful. Bitter ex-wife. The prosecutor read them aloud. Evan's face tightened with each line. Did you write this? The prosecutor asked. Yes, but context matters. Then provide it. Evan looked toward Nora. Not for forgiveness. For rescue. The old instinct rose in her body like a ghost. Smooth it over. Make the room less painful. Protect the man you loved from the full sound of himself. Nora placed both hands in her lap and let the instinct die there. Evan looked back at the prosecutor. It was private frustration. And the money? No answer could soften that. 3 weeks later, the verdict came. Guilty on multiple counts. Miles Crane took a plea. Lyra received reduced sentencing for cooperation, but her career in corporate consulting ended publicly and permanently. Evan was sentenced to prison, ordered to pay restitution, and banned from serving as an officer in any public or regulated company for years after release. The headlines were merciless. Former Whitaker executive convicted in vendor fraud scheme. Affair partner testifies in corporate theft case. Ex-wife's audit triggered collapse of Crony network. Nora read none of them after the first day. She did not need strangers to tell her what had happened. She had been there when it began. She had ended it. Chapter 13. The man who supported Nora arrived before she was ready for love. His name was Adrian Cole, and he was hired as independent compliance director after the investigation. He was not flashy. That helped. He wore plain suits, asked precise questions, and had the unsettling habit of reading entire contracts before commenting on them. Nora liked him first because he never tried to impress Arthur. Arthur liked him because of that. Adrian's first meeting with Nora lasted 2 hours. He entered with a notebook, sat across from her, and said, "I need to understand where the old system rewarded loyalty over accuracy." Nora looked up from the procurement map. That is a good sentence. I try to have one per day. She almost smiled. For months after Evan's arrest, Nora's world had been built of urgency. Audits, statements, employee meetings, legal calls, court dates, board reviews. Adrian arrived like a person who understood that repair was less glamorous than exposure and more important afterward. He did not ask her about the divorce. He asked where approval authority had been too concentrated. He asked why junior staff were afraid to flag vendor discrepancies. He asked whether any employees who had resisted Evan were still in the company and deserved restoration. That last question made Nora look at him differently. Restoration? People who are punished for being right often leave systems worse than they found them. She leaned back. You always talk like that? Unfortunately. Over the next year, they worked together to rebuild the company. Quietly, thoroughly, new vendor rules, anonymous reporting, rotating approvals, protection for employees who challenged executives. Nora pushed hard. Adrian pushed back when needed. That mattered more than agreement. The first time he opposed her in a meeting, the room went silent. Nora had recommended immediate termination for a manager who had signed 2 questionable approvals under pressure from Miles. Adrian reviewed the file and said, "No, she documented objections twice and was overruled. If we fire her, we teach people that telling the truth late is pointless." Everyone looked at Nora. The old Evan would have challenged her to prove dominance. Adrian only waited. Nora read the file again. He was right. Revise the recommendation, she said. Afterward, she found Adrian by the elevators. You knew everyone was watching. Yes. You still said no. You hired me for judgment, not decoration. Something inside her shifted. Respect, she realized, did not always arrive as praise. Sometimes it arrived as a man trusting her enough to disagree honestly. Their friendship grew in small ways. Coffee during late vendor reviews. A shared joke about the accounting software. Adrian leaving protein bars on her desk after noticing she skipped lunch during board weeks. Nora returning the favor by marking a grammar mistake in his policy draft with an unnecessarily dramatic red circle. He supported her without hovering. When Evan was sentenced, Adrian did not say congratulations. He walked into her office after the news broke, placed a cup of tea on her desk, and said, "Do you want quiet or distraction?" Nora looked at him. No one had asked it that way. "Quiet," she said. He nodded and left. 5 minutes later, he returned with the quarterly compliance report and sat across from her without speaking. They worked for 2 hours. It was the kindest thing anyone did for her that week. Chapter 14. Marjorie wrote Nora one letter after Evan went to prison. It arrived on thick paper, the kind Marjorie used when she wanted apologies to feel like invitations. Nora almost threw it away. Then she opened it because avoidance gave the letter too much power. Nora. I visited Evan yesterday. He looks older. Prison has made him smaller in ways I cannot explain. I know you may think I deserve that pain. Perhaps I do. I have spent months replaying the night I came to your apartment and the years before it. I told myself I protected my son because mothers must. The truth is uglier. I protected the version of him that made me feel successful. I saw his entitlement and called it confidence. I saw his cruelty and called it pressure. I saw your patience and called it weakness. Nora stopped reading. She breathed once. Then continued. I am sorry I hit you. I am sorry I knew about Lyra and let you sit at my table beside her. I am sorry I asked you to save him from consequences he earned. I do not ask forgiveness. I am learning that asking would be another demand. Marjorie had signed only her name. No motherly flourish. No request. Nora folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She did not forgive Marjorie that day. But she believed, for the first time, that the apology belonged to reality. That was something. At Whitaker Meridian, the public exposure changed everything. Not overnight. Companies did not heal like bruises. They healed like cities after floods, one inspection, one repair, one honest map at a time. Employees who had been pushed aside by Evan's cronies returned. One warehouse manager, Mrs. Patel, had documented suspicious logistics contracts for a year and been labeled difficult. Nora promoted her to regional oversight. Mrs. Patel cried in Nora's office, then apologized for crying. Nora handed her tissues. Do not apologize. You were right before powerful people wanted to hear it. Mrs. Patel covered her face. That moment mattered more to Nora than any headline. The company began to trust itself again. So did she. One evening, after a board meeting that ended without disaster, Adrian walked with her to the lobby. Outside, rain fell softly against the glass. You did well today, he said. Nora smiled. That sounded painful for you. Praise is not my native language. No, footnotes are. He laughed. The sound surprised her. Warm, unguarded, brief. She realized then that she had been waiting for it. That frightened her. Adrian noticed. Too much? He asked. 2 words. Simple. Respectful. Evan had never asked that. Evan entered rooms assuming his presence set the temperature. Adrian checked the air. Nora looked at the rain. No, she said. Just unfamiliar. He nodded. Unfamiliar can go slowly. She turned back to him. There it was again. Support without possession. Would you like dinner? She asked. Adrian blinked once, which was the closest she had ever seen him come to losing composure. With you? No, with the quarterly report. He smiled. I would like dinner with you. They went to a small restaurant with bad lighting and excellent soup. They did not discuss Evan. They did not discuss fraud. They discussed books, terrible hotel carpets, childhood fears, and why Adrian believed people revealed themselves by how they handled shared appetizers. Nora laughed more than she expected. When he walked her home, he did not try to kiss her at the door. He only said, "Thank you for trusting me with an evening." After he left, Nora stood in her apartment hallway for a long time. Trusting him with an evening. Not her life. Not her name. Not her silence. An evening. That felt like a beginning she could survive. Chapter 15. 2 years after the divorce, Whitaker Meridian held its annual meeting in the restored Central Hall. The company had recovered more than half the stolen funds through settlements, insurance claims, and asset seizures. Evan remained in prison. Miles Crane had taken a plea and was barred from corporate procurement work. Lyra served a reduced sentence under cooperation terms, lost her professional licenses, and became a public example in every compliance seminar that Nora never attended because she disliked hearing her pain turned into training content. Their crimes had been exposed. Their punishment was real. Not poetic. Real. Money returned, careers ended, prison doors closed, names printed in court records, photographs attached to business articles that would follow them for decades. Nora did not need to add anything. At the annual meeting, Arthur introduced her as Chief Operating Officer. Not acting. Official. The applause was long. Nora stood at the podium in a deep green suit. Adrian sat near the front, no longer just compliance director, but her partner in the careful, private sense. They had been together for 8 months, slowly, honestly, with boundaries discussed before they became wounds. Arthur sat behind her, watching with the expression of a father trying not to look emotional in front of shareholders. Nora began without drama. 2 years ago, this company discovered that trust had been treated as a weakness. Personal loyalty replaced oversight. Charm replaced documentation. Silence replaced courage. The hall quieted. We paid for that. Some paid with money, some with jobs, some with faith in the company they had served for years. Today, I want to say clearly that the exposure of wrongdoing did not damage Whitaker Meridian. The wrongdoing damaged us. The truth gave us a chance to repair. Employees listened. Some had tears in their eyes. A company is not protected by pretending powerful people do not steal. A family is not protected by asking women to stay quiet when men betray them. And dignity is not silence. Dignity is the strength to tell the truth with clean hands. Arthur looked down. Adrian's eyes never left her face. After the meeting, people surrounded her. Employees thanked her. Board members shook her hand. Reporters asked questions. Nora answered what mattered and ignored what did not. When the hall finally emptied, she found Adrian near the side door. Footnotes? She asked. Only one. That sounds suspicious. He held out a folded note. Nora opened it. It read, "You built a room where truth can stand. I am honored to stand in it with you." Nora looked up. For a moment, the central hall blurred, not from grief this time, from something softer and harder to distrust. "You wrote that down?" "I did not want to phrase it badly." She laughed. Then she kissed him. Not because he saved her. Because he never tried to take credit for the fact that she saved herself. Chapter 16. Nora visited the old courthouse steps once, almost by accident. She had a meeting nearby and walked past the building on a clear autumn afternoon. The rain from that divorce day was long gone. People hurried in and out carrying folders, coffees, arguments, hopes. The stone steps looked ordinary. That surprised her. Places where life changes should look marked, she thought. But the world rarely kept plaques for private endings. She stood where she had stood that day, phone in hand, while Evan crossed the street and told her she would regret taking action. She remembered the feeling of the divorce certificate, the rain, the shock in his face when she called Arthur, the first clean sentence that belonged entirely to her. Fire all his cronies today. People later called it ruthless. Some called it brilliant. Marjorie had called it cruel. Nora now thought of it as housekeeping. Not the small kind, not dusting shelves or folding linen. The kind that clears rot before the beams give way. Her phone buzzed. Adrian? Dinner at 7? I found a place with suspiciously confident soup. Nora smiled. She typed, "Only if you are prepared to audit the bread." His reply came quickly. Always. Nora put the phone away and looked once more at the courthouse doors. The woman who had stood there 2 years earlier had been angry, frightened, newly divorced, and bruised by betrayal. She had also been right. That mattered. Women were often told to wait until pain made them graceful enough for public consumption, to speak softly, forgive quickly, and let powerful men keep their exits clean. Nora had tried that version of dignity. It nearly turned her into a witness to her own erasure. Now she knew better. Dignity could be quiet. It could also be decisive. It could call a father, fire the cronies, release the audit, testify in court, rebuild the company, and still go to dinner with a man who asked before stepping closer. Justice had not returned the years Evan wasted. Nothing could. But justice had returned the truth to its rightful owner. Nora walked down the steps into the autumn light. For the first time in years, she was not cleaning up after a man. She was no longer measuring her worth by how quietly she survived betrayal. She had learned that a woman could be graceful and still decisive, wounded and still correct, loved again without handing over the keys to her judgment. She was building after herself.